I'm joined now by Dick Clerkin, former Monaghan footballer, but I suppose with what's going on at the moment, more importantly, member of the GAA's COVID-19 advisory group and also chair of Croke Park's Medical, Scientific and Welfare Committee. There's been an awful lot of noise at the moment, Dick. You hear certain people talking, should we call off the inter-county championships? NPHET have obviously said, NPHET, you could argue possibly, some of the strictest measures in Europe are in Ireland, and if NPHET, who are advising the government, are even saying that the Gaelic season should go ahead, and conservative and all as they are, that would give you a fair indication that the risk level is pretty low. From your point of view, and being involved in the COVID advisory group and seeing like a Gaelic footballer, Bevan Duffy, at the weekend from Louth, he said the protocols need to be better without a doubt. There hasn't been any testing at all, which I can't get my head around. Is this, like, from your point of view, is that frustrating to hear? Can you sort of debunk the myths? Where are we actually at?
No, it's to be expected because that's where we're at. Like, things are moving, I suppose, at such a pace, and there's so many things outside your control in terms of commentary, and there's no single correct line on any of this, Shane. Like, there's so many different opinions, and you have to accept that you're going to have to deal with all that. Now, is it frustrating to hear stuff that gets floated around that's just not accurate in terms of what protocols are? It is, but that's really just down to communication, and if a player or a manager or a chairman isn't fully aware of protocols that are there and tests and schemes, well, that you can do two things. You can say, oh, you're wrong, and this is what happened, or you can sort of say, well, maybe we need to look at how we're communicating that. Was there something that was missing? So I think, not to name anyone individually or deal with anything, as I say, you can't over communicate this stuff, I think, is the key thing, Shane. And I suppose, like last week and the weeks before, around the new protocols, tests and schemes, like, they were all communicated out to all players, all county board individual mentors and team managers. So there's a responsibility at central level to get the information out there in the best way. But let's be honest, there equally isn't it a responsibility on the other side for people to, how would I say, proactively inform themselves, because the stuff is there, but like, there is a huge level of personal responsibility out there, that all of this, not just from a GAA point of view, Shane, from a societal point of view, a personal responsibility of knowing what's expected of us, and to go looking for information if you think there's something you're not sure about. So, I'd like to think there'd be more of that, from a playing body and ourselves, and like the GP have been very good in terms of getting that information out there. So listen, I think, and I'm not to be unfair to anybody, I'd like to think now that there's much more better informed players out there in terms of what the schemes are, because they are relatively new. Like, they're only in the last sort of week or 10 days, which isn't a huge amount of time to make sure that whatever 1,000 players fully understand them.
And to take the miscommunication or lack of communication or lack of information out of it, what is actually available to inter-county teams? There's no two-tiered system where the top teams are getting looked after.
No. I suppose, just to be very clear, okay, so there's a rapid testing scheme there that's available through a contracted provider that GAA went out and tendered to and got to support us. So very simply, and this has been communicated to all county teams, if a team or a player, it could be an individual, a couple of players, or a full panel, wish to avail of the rapid testing, that's their decision, and then they have to make contact with Croke Park, and then that'll be facilitated. So there isn't a scheme that every team is routinely tested weekly or bi-weekly. That's not the scheme. That in case people think that is there, and it's not a financial. That's why that wasn't done, even though that there's a very strong argument for that. There's other strong medical opinions around, just doing random screen testing, which effectively that is. There's a lot of limitations and pitfalls with that as well. I think Mary Organ was speaking yesterday, who's on our panel as well, was very articulate, and she's been a great voice of reason in our group around just screen testing, because you have this issue with false positives, which are statistical facts, whether people like to hear them or not. You test X amount of people, often know if you're going to get false positives, and each of those cases has a massive potential impact. So I think to date, we've always been very clear, Shane, we are as much as possible aligning ourselves with public health protocols, which is you test symptomatic players or those those that potentially think they might have been a close contact of somebody, not just within their team, it could be at home, work, whatever, but they have a concern, or somebody that is deemed a close contact. And that's so what we're doing is 100% in line with public health guidelines, basically, and all the rapid testing system is essentially, it's a quicker turnaround than what you would otherwise get going through the public health system. It is essentially no different, because I think and I'm sure you've spoken to people that have gone through the public health system. It can be slow. It can be a number of days, a week potentially, depending on where you hit. Whereas we can get a near enough a 24, 48-hour turnaround on test and result, which is obviously much better from the playing point of view.
So from your point of view, do you feel that the GAA are doing everything they possibly can, and they've let counties know? So when you see criticism, are you wondering why? Because you are doing everything you can.
I think it's not. It's not a black and white. As it going by, we can't over communicate it. So we can't just sort of say because we sent emails out with communications. It's a case of constantly reinforcing the message, and even when protocols are sent out there, we know everyone has got the information. That's not good enough either, Shane. It has to be a case of making sure that the protocols are sustained, and are trying to keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening at games, what's happening internally, getting feedback from players that are they've been followed. So it's not just good enough to say that everyone's read them. That's just that's one step. It then has to be sure that they just become the norm, and that they've been implemented every training, every game, that we don't have slippage. So as I said, I do this work, as a consultant with companies. It's the easiest thing in the world to just hand somebody a procedure and say, that's my job done. I says, no, the job is done when that's been sustained and implemented routinely, that it just becomes the norm. So as I say, we've given the information, we've got off to a good start, but it's not done until 6 weeks' time. We just see that's the norm, and you've got good comfort that you're not picking on the TV, hoping things are been done right. You just know that they are, because that's where things have moved to.
So when you see people asking publicly whether the All-Ireland Inter-County Championships should go ahead, and some people openly saying they think they shouldn't, what are your thoughts on that?
You can totally understand it. Like, everybody, everyone has their own interests, and we have to accept that, for us that are so invested in the GAA, we know what it means to us, and it's very easy. I was listening to yourself and Michael talking about this yesterday. It's very easy for us to articulate that and understand why the value of doing what we're doing is there. For people that aren't, I can understand why they're looking across the ditch and saying, well, I can't run my business, I can't play my sport or do what I do, but they can do theirs. Like that, there's a fairness thing that is sitting uneasy with people at the minute, and that's just human nature, and I totally understand that. But I suppose to break it down and go back to your point about NPHET, okay, so they've looked at what we're doing or put forward to do very simply at a health and safety point of view. Can we do, based on the protocols, do what we're doing safely? And if that couldn't be answered, there is no conversation. So it's not a case of we've been given favouritism. It's because the protocols and the systems that we put around has it such that inter-county elite activity, GAA, is low risk in their eyes, and on that basis we just have to have the confidence to go forward. It's not that we're getting preferential treatment because of the GAA. Let's be honest, what happened the previous 2 or 3 weeks from the club fallout, I would be surprised if there was any favouritism going our way. If anything else, there was potentially a red flag. So our protocols for the inter-county game, what was demonstrated over the weekend, I think all of that had to be watertight. And if I felt if there was any evidence of slippage or things not been done right at the weekend, quite easily that could have been the grain of rice to tip it against us. And I can imagine the conversation that went on in there, people knowing how contentious it probably might be from almost a PR point of view, even though we are confident that it's a low risk activity. But we put the protocols together. We think they're practical, that they can be done safely, they don't impact the integrity of the games or the competitions as much as possible, and that they're achievable. And this, thankfully, NPHET and the government have recognised that and given us the green light.
Yeah, I don't know if you have this sort of information, but Do you have feedback or numbers in terms of like, have there been any clusters at games? Because we keep hearing about house parties and stuff, and I think they're going to happen whether it's GA or not. But I presume you wouldn't have figures, or certainly NPHET wouldn't have said to you there's clusters at games.
We tracked figures that would have been reported through GA clubs. I suppose if you talk about frustrations, Shane, the one frustration I probably have had the whole summer is that, and it's not a frustration, it's probably just reflection of the size of the organisation, that any case that sort of presents itself through a GA club, it's almost as if it's a GA problem. We own it, whereas that the vast majority of them were external, if not in all cases, that it was somebody got it from work or from home or social, but they presented it at the GA club, and next thing it was reported that a club had a case, whereas we didn't contribute to that in many cases, but yet we owned it in many ways and dealt with it. Whereas I'm sure a lot of those players were playing golf and they were in a gym and they might have played a bit of soccer, so that it could have been owned by several different organisations, but we own it, and that's going to be the case, I think, for the rest of the winter. So, but that being said, we certainly didn't share those responsibilities, and so any incidents that were reported, through which there were many, and it was a case of tracking the frequency in terms of locations and making sure then that the protocols in terms of dealing with the symptoms and testing and isolation was being adhered to. And but in terms of evidence that a cluster developed within a GA setting as a result of GA activities, no, we have no evidence of that. Anything that was there, it was outside the fences, if you want to call it, and it not essentially under our control. A lot of it was anecdotal as well. There was a lot of hearsay about this, and you hear like tell it, but that's not being naive to think that there weren't things that happened that were directly linked to GA teams, which we all regret and would hope don't happen again, and I'm disappointed that they did happen.
Obviously, a couple of club championships didn't get to finish off, and they ultimately will. For example, Laois, Offaly, these once they get knocked out of their inter-county championships, those games may then be played again. We'll have to see how things pan out.
Yeah.
Is there any concern, like what can be learned from what we saw? Where other teams celebrated too much, where there was lack of social distant games. Can we avoid a repeat?
Yeah. I think. Listen, I think there was when you look back and you review about what happened. There was root causes, as we talk about in today's thing. I think there was a bit of a perfect storm scenario happened in that there was at the same time as the club seasons were going well, and there was a very good positive wind in our sails in terms of how safe everything was. There was and not just in the GA sense, but in a societal sense, there was a complacency had set in. And you went to a golf club, you went to a restaurant, you went to the shops, you seen it everywhere. So everybody had just sort of dropped their guard a wee bit. So everyone would be done. And that then just sort of infiltrates everything. So therefore, if it's okay to have a celebration more than you normally should have, because nobody's going to tell you you shouldn't do that, because everybody's doing it in their own way. So there was that sort of crept in a broader sense. Then you had pubs basically opening near enough at the same time as county finals have been played. Like, they literally happened, and I know in certain counties the Monday was the first time a pub had been open in the community for 6 months, and the county final, like, that is just, as I say, it's almost petrol to an open flame. And then you have the exuberance of winning. So all these things just came together, and it was almost happening before we sort of realised what was happening. And in fairness, John Horn, they had no choice, to call it. And I think everybody recognises that, you couldn't guarantee that it wasn't going to happen. Even though there might be extra controls and extra awareness and all the rest, it was just too high a risk, and just the way things had I suppose had increased from a COVID point of view. They just couldn't countenance risking things going on any further, until there's probably better awareness and learnings and all the rest to hopefully commence them again. But listen, that's probably going to be into next year at this stage, because it's a government decision now. It's outside the GA's control. So at least we were ahead of it and took ownership of it. Difficult and all that it was at the time.
Did you get much of a sense of the wind changing recently? Everyone was delighted when the club championship's back, looking forward to the inter-county. Then obviously those couple of situations happened. The clubs were shut down. And then in the last week or so, maybe 2 weeks, rising cases around the country. This sort of sentiment that the All-Ireland Championship shouldn't happen, in spite of the fact that NPHET have even said they should. Did you get that sense of the wind changing and an anti-GAA season bias coming in?
Prior to the weekend, so say if you last Friday back to when the club championships, there was that 2 week block. It was an awful time. No point in saying otherwise. Very difficult. You were reeling from the club seasons having been finished, and then all of the talk around why and all those instances, and all the good work that was done was quickly forgotten. But like in sport, you're only as good as your last game, as they say. So all the good things that were done, from cool camps and all the club games, the hundreds of thousands, I would say millions of questionnaires that were done to make sure that the club games ran without incident all summer, that was just sidelined, sadly, because of a few incidents, and that obviously got a lot of press, and that was difficult. You see in other ways, because it just left everything then very up in the air in terms of the inter-county season. Would that then get the green light, even though we knew and everyone would accept it as a different level? It's much more control in terms of the teams and the resources and the grounds to make sure that there is no slippage, but that can get lost in that sort of hysteria that almost was there for a few days, Shane. And that wasn't just external people, non-GAA. There was a lot of internal stuff that was been thrown about, because it was a good time to be reeling against the GAA, that some people love to do it, and sadly even our own. That being said, we had a good weekend, and I do feel that the wind has changed in our own direction now, and it's no surprise that you're hearing a lot less people coming out of the woodwork anti-GAA this week, because maybe the popular wind isn't blowing in their favour this time.
And just in terms of the GPA bringing out a statement 5 days ago at this point, and they said essentially 76% of players do want to play, 24% want stronger protocols. Yeah. And what are your thoughts on that, to get that more or less on the eve of the championship, and you're involved with the COVID advisory group? What were your thoughts on that coming out at that particular point?
I think it was needed. I'm not personally, and this is not. I think because I work with statistics and surveys, numbers every day, and everything has to be taken in context at the time it's taken, and very easy to hone in on one single number, and you have to look at the bigger picture. But see, when it gets into this level, people don't. They look at the one number that suits the narrative, and then that does the rounds, and you can almost lose control of what the broader message of the survey was. So listen, I think it was important that the GPA got a sense, and equally that the members got a sense that they were being heard essentially in terms of their thoughts. I wasn't surprised with the results. I could have largely predicted that you were going to have a portion of players that were uncomfortable, but the broader sense, yes, we are, but let's make sure we do things as good as we can. If you remember, Shane, I think there was a club player survey back earlier in the summer. Again, give pretty similar outputs in terms of, a relatively high percentage of club players at that stage, weren't comfortable. Now, you and me both know that there was zero evidence of that once the games kicked off and club players got back in playing and seeing how safe it was and got over that initial apprehension. And you'd like to think, like, at the end of the day, the county players that took that survey were club players back then, and they're going into environments that are at a much higher level now, and they'll have seen the protocols, they understand the testing scheme now, which I think is fair to say probably not 100% of them did, because of the comments and stuff that were floating about over the last number of days. So everyone will know that there's a testing there available for them if they need it. And even how their own teams and sort of the groundsmen at the various stadium are controlling things, and they've seen that, because all well and good having something written on paper, anyone can do that, Shane, but you actually have to experience it to really believe and understand how good they are. So I think we'll push that number further into the positive territory over the next coming days and weeks as players get into the way of going on.
And just a final question, as a Monaghan man, Monaghan lost to Kerry at the weekend, 14 points to 17. Have Meath up in Clonus this weekend.
Yeah.
Are you happy with the way Monaghan are going and over? Like, it's 7.5 months without seeing them, so it can be hard to tell. But do you have any thoughts on them at the moment?
No, I listen. I think they competed really well. They probably just lacked a bit of cut up front. Manzi coming in the second half obviously made a big impact. And people make this big thing about you're too reliant on Manzi. Sure, that's what makes good teams great players. More so than Kerry. Wouldn't want to be talking out with David Clifford or Mayo with Aidan O'Shea. So, like Connor's fit. That's the only thing we have to worry about, that he's fit and he looks strong and he looks sharp. Players are off the back of a good competitive club season here. The Scotstown players are all in good shape. The two Hughes, Conor McCarthy. So, I think fitness wise, Banty and the Monaghan guys could be happy where they're at. They look fit. They look sharp. Just weren't clinical up front against a good Kerry team. That's called a spade a spade. That's number 2 in rating, and there'd be a toss of the coin, I'd say, between Dublin and Kerry at this stage. So, Monaghan competing well against the best of the best isn't a bad place to be.
And do you think an Ulster title is the height of the ambitions? Can Monaghan go further?
No, I think not. I think I know Seamus, and even from when Seamus was involved, he always looked to Croke Park. He really wanted that Ulster title. He never got, but that didn't shirk him from really relishing the big days and putting out performances. And not to be critical or comparing managers, you could go back to our performances against that great Kerry team in 07 and 08. They were still probably Monaghan's best Croke Park performances over the last 10-15 years, whereas I think maybe we didn't bring that same level of ambition out of Ulster over the last 10 years. We may have had better teams, you can argue the toss on that. So Seamus will be primed. He will when we get to Croke Park, we'll be positive here, he'll be relishing it. Well, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Dublin or Kerry, he'll have the guys up and believe in that they can put in a huge performance and go all the way. And I think the way things are going to lay out, it's going to be tough. Like, you're playing back to back. Now, that can equally, if you can get through that without injuries, that can be a great way that you're playing games, and it's you just get up momentum and all the rest. So, if they can keep the boys fit, keep Manzi fit, the Hugheses, Rory Beggan are key players, maybe get a few new guys coming through, and I think the chance of a really good summer.
And one final question then. Dublin beat Meath 120 to 19 points. They're still in line for a league title depending on how things go this weekend. Are Dublin vulnerable at all?
I'm really looking forward to. I think Meath. I seen Meath a few times last year on the qualifier and the Super 8 circuit, and I think they're not far away. I think I'd really love to see Meath have a really good cut at Dublin in the Leinster final. I think that could be a really good game. I think Dublin will still win, but I think Meath are. They'll have taken great heart from that performance.
And they were missing a lot of players. They were missing their entire full back line. No Brian McMahon, no Wallaces. They've a lot of quality to come back.
That Shane Walsh lad up front. Like, one thing I remarked in general, you probably might have seen as well, Shane had physically fit and strong. An awful lot of players have got over the lockdown. I noticed Conor McManus looks strong. He tossed somebody when he came on. Killian O'Connor, Mayo boys look strong and fit. That Shane Walsh I mentioned. I think it's Shane Walsh, isn't it? For me, the young lad. Looked a bit young and pudgy, not to be unfair to him that couple of years, but he looked fit and strong, and he put in a performance. And you get a sense of that Meath team now are doing what they probably haven't been doing for the last 10 years, really putting in the work behind the closed doors to make them a proper Division 1 team. And if they run into a Division 1 circuit again, I think they fancied themselves chances of staying up. I think they probably just they were just unlucky in a lot of games. So I think Meath will give Dublin a really good cut in Leinster. Obviously then I'm hoping it's going to be either a Monaghan, or if not Monaghan, it'll be a Donegal Dublin semi-final. Either of those teams will have a really good cut at them, and if they get through those, it's to a Kerry final. So I think it'll be a more difficult route maybe than Dublin had because if nothing else they'll get a tough run in one Leinster game this year that they might have had for the last number of years. So all those things sometimes can add up to prove the difference. But listen, there's so much to play for. Look, COVID, injuries, a lot of uncontrollables are out there. So see how we get on.
Yeah, you got me all riled up for the championship now. Look, appreciate you taking the time.
Hopefully we keep going.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem.